Hello, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you 6 angsty romance recommendations. Lately, I feel like I've been reflecting on what I personally enjoy in romances as I endeavor to pick up new things. And something that I feel like I come across time and again that I am super into is a really angsty, juicy, tension-filled romance. Don't get me wrong, from time to time, I like something easy breezy, just like a rom-com, but I would say the vast majority of the romances that I really fall for, hook, line, and sinker, are ones that have either mutual pining, which I've already done a video on. I'll leave a link in the description down below, and also ones that have a lot of angst. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you 6 recommendations. These are some of my favorite romances in general, and also just my favorite romances that have this particular trope. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let me tell you about these 6 angsty romances. So first up is a book that I've read recently, and it has quickly risen to the top of my list of not only favorite angsty romances, but favorite romances of all time, and that is Waking Olivia by Elizabeth O'Rourke. This book is about a girl named Olivia. I know, shocking. And at the start of the story, she ends up transferring from the University of Texas to a school in, I want to say, the eastern part of Colorado, not the pretty part. She is transferring so she can do cross country. She's a very talented runner, and at the start of the story we kind of know that something happened, that she didn't necessarily want to transfer from UT, but that she was kind of kicked off the team and is being forced to go to Colorado if she wants to continue her running career. While the head coach, the men's cross country coach in Colorado is excited for her to be there, the coach for the women's team has not a lot of interest in Olivia. He really doubts that she can be successful on the team after what she's done at her last school, which we don't know what that thing is at the beginning of the story. We see this sort of combative relationship develop between Olivia and her coach, Will. And as I'm sure you could guess, the relationship here is going to be between Olivia and her coach. Don't worry, there's not too much of an age gap, so if that's something that really is worrisome to you, that probably won't be an issue for you in this story, though there is kind of a forbidden aspect to their relationship, which obviously is what makes this book so angsty. On top of that, we also have a kind of mystery, I would say, surrounding the characters in this book. Olivia, obviously, we're trying to figure out why she transferred from that university in Texas, the University of Texas, I should say, why she is having some of the issues that she's having. I don't want to give anything away about this book because I feel like it is so much more rewarding to kind of figure out the clues and the details along the way while you're reading. Needless to say, I think this romance is so juicy. There's just something about the way that Elizabeth O'Rourke writes that I feel like makes her stories so different than a lot of the ones that I read typically. I really enjoy the way that she is able to have a really good banter relationship between her heroes and heroines while also maintaining this sort of melancholic feel. I feel like it's really rare to have a romance that really does read as mildly depressing without being too down in the dumps. It's not like the subject matters that she discusses are typically super depressing, but the overall tone is not something that's super lighthearted and fluffy. This is not what I would consider to be a beach read. I think if you're looking for something that is so delicious and angsty and tension filled, that is not overly long, that's only, I want to say, I think it's under 400 pages, but still has that slow burn feel of something like a Mariana Zapata book, I think you would really, really love Waking Olivia. It's a book that, again, is a new all-time favorite for me. It's a book that I really personally enjoy, and it's a book that I think is best read in the fall time. I definitely think this is a book that I personally would love to reread when it's raining, when it's kind of ugly out. It has that perfect vibe and that perfect energy, and I think if you're someone who is looking for a good angsty romance, this is one that you should definitely add to your list. Next up is a book that, I'll be honest, I haven't read in about 6 years, so the details are going to be a little bit fuzzy for me, but the reason that I'm adding this book to the list, I'll tell you what the book is in just a second. The reason I'm adding this one to the list is because I was recently reading Magnolia Parks, a book which I have complicated emotions and feelings towards, and while that one didn't totally work for me, it really reminded me of what I love about Kiss the Sky by Krista and Becca Ritchie. It has some similar themes and commonalities with the whole rich kid publicity aspect, but this one is done in a way that I think is maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit more well fleshed out. So this series is an extension of the Addicted series that I feel like gets a lot of attention and publicity online, especially nowadays. I personally feel like the spin-off Calloway Sisters series is the superior series in a lot of ways. I really adore the relationship between Rose and Connor, which is what the first and third books in this 4-book series focus on. So Kiss the Sky is a book about, like I just said, Rose and Connor. Rose is the heiress to a Coca-Cola-esque company, so her family has a lot of money. She is a little bit of a socialite, and she is trying to get her clothing business off the ground. It's kind of failing at the moment, and she thinks that going on this reality television show with her sisters is what is going to kind of save her business and hopefully give her much needed publicity, the right kind of publicity that she wants. And she's also roped some of her friends into this show, including her boyfriend Connor. So she and and Connor are going to be living in the same house together, along with some of the other Calloway sisters and like friends. Things get a little bit complicated because there is an additional dude kind of thrown into the mix that Rose is supposed to kind of like have a thing with and or kind of maybe develop some feelings for. So it's a little bit of a love triangle, but I would say the primary relationship here is between Rose and Connor. I would say Rose is kind of this type A, kind of complex heroine, and then we have Connor, who is this very shrewd businessman who goes really well with Rose. Like, he complements her personality very well. And I think what I liked about this book so much is that the two characters definitely have very defined personalities. We know what each of them want out of life and out of their relationship. It's interesting seeing how that creates angst and tension. It's very clear to me that Krista and Becca really knew what they were doing when they created these two characters. They are, I would say, pretty nuanced, and I disagree with some of the reviews on Goodreads that say, oh, Rose is like a typical ice queen, virgin heroine. I totally disagree with that. I think she has a layer of complexity that I don't see very often in romance in general, but also especially like new adult romance. That was an issue that I had with Magnolia Parks. I felt like the characters weren't particularly complex, even though there was like an attempt made there. I feel like the characters in this book actually do have a complexity that I find interesting, and I just really liked the relationship between Connor and Rose. It made sense why they had this kind of like push and pull relationship, and even if it wasn't like the, you know, forbidden relationship that made the most sense in the world, like, I understood why they didn't have the strongest relationship and like what was kind of keeping them apart. I think this is a book that could appeal to a lot of people. I'm not super big into reality television, but something about this series just really sucked me in, and the idea of like being on reality television with your family, like, that sounded interesting to me, and I just like the different antics that the characters in this series get into. Like I said, it's been a while since I've read these books, so I don't know that like they 100% hold up to today's standards, but I do feel like I see enough people recommending them nowadays that like feel fairly safe in recommending this one. I just remember again like loving that angsty, tension-filled relationship. That's definitely the case too for the other couple in this like 4-book series. I think it's Daisy and Reich. Is that his name? I'm not entirely sure. That one definitely is kind of like a forbidden taboo thing, but does have that sort of like angsty, tension-filled thing that Krista and Becca are like typically known for. So I would definitely say give this one a try if you are into kind of reality television, or you have read Magnolia Parks and you're looking for something similar. Like, this definitely has a similar vibe to it, and in my opinion is like a little bit better. Next up, we have a smutty pick because I like to give you options here. We have Give Me More by Sarah Kate. Give Me More is the 3rd book in the Salacious Players Club series, and this is a book that I feel like I'm hearing a little bit of buzz about. In general, I've heard a lot of buzz about the Salacious Players Club series, but I feel like maybe not as many people have read this one as the other books in the series, and I think that's a shame because I really like how like smutty and angsty the story was. This book in particular is about Isabel, Drake, and Hunter. That's right, it is a polyamorous relationship. Isabel and Hunter are married, and Drake is one of their best friends. They have each individual like best friend relationships with him, and in general like they take him along with them for various different exploits. Not sexual exploits, you know, until later into the book, but at the beginning of this story, the 3 of them kind of team up to travel across the country and look at different demonstrations and acts, I guess you could say, in different sex clubs across America, because Isabel, Drake, and Hunter are, you know, part owners in the Salacious Players Club, which is a sex club, and so they're going across the US and trying to see these different demonstrations to see what they can bring back to their own club to make it more exciting, generate more revenue, etc. And while they are there, Drake and Isabel, best friends, do a shibari demonstration. I think one of them ties the other one up, and Hunter sees this and is like intrigued immediately. After a little bit of thinking and pondering, he discovers that he might have some sexual interest in his wife having sex with someone else while he watches. So that's sort of how the relationship begins, but that's definitely not where this relationship starts and ends. You have a lot of smutty scenes between all 3 of them together, of them individually, like with each other, you know, like pairs. What's so interesting about this book is that while it is smutty, there is enough emotional depth and emotional attention to detail that I think it keeps you interested the entire time. I really liked seeing Hunter's transformation throughout the series in accepting his sexuality. I don't know, I liked the individual relationships that everybody had with each other, and then how that like polyamorous relationship, the 3 of them together, like really worked and really was essentially satisfying to them. Now, I definitely said this book is smutty, and I definitely stand by that. I don't think this is the story for you if you're looking for something that is really emotionally heart-wrenching and is going to, I don't know, make you sob or something. This definitely is not that kind of book, and in general, I don't think any of the books in the Salacious Players Club series are particularly like emotional reads, but I think if you're looking for something that is kind of a good time, you want something that maybe you haven't read before, and you, again, are just like looking for something smutty with just enough attention to emotion to keep you interested, I think this is a book that you're really going to enjoy. I know I certainly did. I would maybe check out some other Goodreads reviews just in case, because I know some people didn't necessarily love the bisexual representation. As a bisexual woman myself, it didn't bother me, but I know that everybody has their own experiences, so it might be worth reading, again, those reviews before picking it up. Though, I don't know, I thought it was a surprisingly angsty, smutty pick, and I really liked it. All right, I know that I just said that last pick was not an emotional read. I stand by that. This next one, though, is probably the most emotional pick on this list, and it is The Air He Breathes by Brittany C. Cherry. This, I would say, is like a classic indie romance. I think this one got recommended a ton back in the day, but I feel like I've heard less and less about it as time goes on, which makes sense. It's not a new release by any means, but I think this one really stands up as a really like angsty, tension-filled story that definitely tugs on the heartstrings. So this book is about Elizabeth and Tristan, and Elizabeth, at the start of the story, she and her young daughter come back to Elizabeth's hometown after the loss of her husband. She is definitely grieving the loss of her husband. She is kind of in a hard place, and she comes across a grumpy guy named Tristan. He is new to town, and he is also dealing with some trauma and some backstory in his own life, right? Well, Elizabeth and Tristan kind of get off on the wrong foot because Tristan is kind of grumpy. He's sort of rude to everybody, but Elizabeth is really insistent on kind of getting to know Tristan and understanding more about him. And she does this, and they quickly kind of fall in bed with each other and use each other, I guess you could say, to soothe their respective griefs. Grieves? Regardless, they're sleeping together and sort of like crying in each other's arms. It's a complicated relationship at the beginning for sure. And as time goes on, they sort of have to struggle with the idea that not only were they providing each other comfort, they were also, you know, getting to know each other and falling for each other. So it's a really like angsty, tension-filled book because, again, there is that like grief component to it. These two are not fully emotionally ready to be in a relationship, but they are realizing that they do have feelings for each other. You know, there's other things keeping them apart for sure because it is a romance and it is a little bit more complicated than that. But I think the story definitely feels earned. I feel like every emotion in this book feels earned, and all of the personality traits are earned. This book, in some ways, is a book that I would recommend to someone who maybe read Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score and didn't totally love that story. I feel like the hero in this book, it makes sense why he is kind of a dick, why he's grumpy to everyone in his life because of the things that he's dealing with. I feel like the emotions that Elizabeth and Tristan are both dealing with, again, are earned because grief is a real son of a bitch, and it makes sense that they would be reacting in ways that they wouldn't necessarily react if they weren't grieving. And I also really like the kind of small town vibes of this story and the series in general. I feel like if you were someone who is constantly on the hunt for like an emotional story to tug on your heartstrings that is pretty well told and that again has that like kind of small town feel, I think this series and this book in particular could really work for you. I would say maybe steer clear of the story if you're someone who doesn't really like cheesy endings and you're not willing to like suspend your disbelief in some of these situations. Something I've noticed actually about some of these like indie emotional stories is that the plot twists or the things that happen at the end of the books are sometimes out of left field and a little bit bizarre, and it can definitely leave you thinking, what the fuck, kind of like scratching your head. I think that can definitely pull some people out of the story, especially if you're a really big realist, but I think if you're someone who is just like, again, wanting to like get into that emotional space, I think this is a book that you'll really enjoy. All right, I'm gonna finish it up with these last two recommendations. First up, we have a story that is one of those 600-page slow burn angst fests, Culti by Mariana Zapata. Culti is probably my favorite of Mariana Zapata's works. There's something about a coach-athlete romance that just really does it for me. I think that's pretty evident because Waking Olivia is also on this list, but there's also something so interesting about the dynamic between Sal and Culti in the story. So this book is about Sal, and she is a professional women's soccer player, and at the start of the story, she ends up getting a new coach. And this is really complicated for her. She has a lot of complicated emotions around it because her new coach is someone that she's had a like professional sports level crush on and like a semi-romantic, like I think you're cute kind of crush on for a really long time, Culti. Culti is a guy who was very charismatic in the limelight when he was a professional soccer player. Now that he's out of the limelight, he has definitely more of a gruff attitude, and Sal's kind of having to cope with this knowledge that she has that he is a different person than she thought that he was, and that he is a human being and not just like a, you know, sports superstar that she has kind of made up in her head. So that dynamic is already very interesting off the bat. But even more interesting, I would say, is again that dynamic between coach and athlete, which I think is already like really fraught with tension and angst. It's also ratcheted up a notch when, again, you have this like grumpy hero who is not really willing to be free with his emotions and how he's feeling. As time goes on in the story, I really loved seeing kind of the playful relationship that develops between Sal and Culti and how he is trying to kind of shape her into this really great athlete. I love the nickname that he has for her. I think that's super sweet. And overall, what can I say? I love a good coach-athlete relationship. I feel like this is the kind of story I would recommend to someone who is not necessarily looking for a page turner, but is looking for more of a slice of life relationship, and the more pages, the better. I know a lot of you really like fan fiction, and you're here for something that is like thousands of pages long, as long as you get to spend more time with characters that you love. And I feel like Mariana Zapata books are the perfect like original content equivalent to that. I feel like you get to spend so much time with their characters, really get to see that relationship develop over time. Like literally nothing is cut out. I feel like I can appreciate that from time to time. Sometimes I just want to sink into a book and feel comforted, even if it's not like, you know, a super emotional, like warm hug kind of read. Something that feels real is really nice. And I think of a lot of Mariana Zapata's heroines, Bella is one who I actually like can appreciate and isn't too irritating. So overall, I just really love this book, and I think this is one that I will probably be rereading here pretty soon. I really do love this story, and I feel like I need to pick it up because again, sometimes you just want to sink into a good book and you want to be there for a while. Also, I should point out that the age gap relationship in this story, Sal is actually 27 at the start of the story, and I think Culti is like in his late 30s. So again, you do have that like forbidden taboo coach-athlete relationship, but they're fully consenting like grown adult people. So love that. And then lastly, a book that I feel like I have only talked about once here on my channel. I think I talked about it in a Friends to Lovers recommendations video, and that is Leah Loves Aries by Anita Sunday. Now, this is a series that I think often gets overlooked, which is a damn shame because in some ways it actually really reminds me of the really popular Only James series. I can't remember the name of the series, to be honest, but the one with like the psychopathic heroes. And while this one definitely is tonally different, I do think there are some similarities in that this one has sort of like a playful rom-com vibe to it. It has kind of like an overarching thematic vibe. Instead of psychopaths, obviously we have sort of like a zodiac flavor to the books. And this story centers on roommates Theo and Jamie. Yes, they were indeed roommates. And I like the setup for this book because it is definitely the most messy part of this book as a whole. Both Theo and his twin sisters' partners broke up with them and then got together with each other. So they are out a roommate and they're looking for someone new to live with. In comes Jamie, who used to tutor Theo in some subject, maybe economics or something like that. And then a slow burn, fluffy sort of relationship develops from there. It's also really fun because Theo is trying to convince Jamie to date his sister the entire time. And so you can see him falling for Jamie as he's trying to like get Jamie with his sister. It's really one of those stories that I feel like reads like fan fiction in a way, but in the best way. You have a lot of like fun tropiness. You have a lot of like forced proximity because they are living kind of in a shared space. I don't know how to really define what this story is, but I think if you are someone who doesn't want a story that's overly long and drawn out like Culti, but you want something that feels very slice of life, that is not heavy on the conflict or forced drama, but definitely has interpersonal angst and tension, I think you would really enjoy this story. I just remember like turning page after page and I'm like, oh my god, when will y'all just kiss? I really loved the relationship that developed between Theo and Jamie, and I did actually like the kind of zodiac spin on things. I remember when I got done reading this book for the first time, I thought to myself, god, I wish there were more romances out there like this that are angsty and tension filled between the two main characters, but that don't have a lot of like outside conflict going on, and that again, like, you know, forced proximity with like a friends to lovers spin on it. You know, it's for me, it's what I enjoy. So I would really recommend this book. I think it's one that often gets overlooked. I think the series in general kind of gets overlooked, and I think I've read all of the books in the series, maybe. All of the ones I've read I've enjoyed, and I think there's like quite a few. So I definitely recommend checking the series out, but certainly this first book because it's, I think, my favorite book in the series. So anyway, those are my 6 angsty romance recommendations for you. Hopefully in watching this you found something new to add to your TBR. I think the majority of these books are also available on Kindle Unlimited, which I know a lot of y'all have on my recommendation, which love that. I think everybody deserves unfettered access to indie romances, but I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I love y'all so much. If you're looking for any other romance recommendations based on tropes or genre, I'll also leave a link in the description to the playlist of other romance recommendations that I've done. But thanks so much for watching. I love y'all so much, and until next time.